But my mother, brother, younger sister, my baby sister, and I lived in these certain apartments. There was a grocery store across the sort of like a not quite an expressway or highway, but it was a main road and it had maybe 3 lanes at certain parts. And almost every day, my mother, baby sister, and I, who was probably maybe 7, 8 at the time, we would go over there to get my mom's cigarettes and just various items, snacks, candy, ice cream, sodas. I was mostly drinking like All Sport, which was a drink similar to Gatorade and those type of drinks, Body Armor, whatever. And it was pretty good, the fruit punch especially. And we would go over there every day. And I remember, I don't know if it was the height of summer or what, but it was warm. It was not winter. And we were going down, the driveway towards the front of the store, and we smelled something. And it was a terrible smell. And I knew right away what it was because I had been reading a lot of true crime books. So I knew it was a dead human body, which my mom said it was not. She said it was a dead animal. I said, no, dead animals don't smell like that. That's a human. And we went back and forth about, calling law enforcement. But we also felt like, what if it is a dog? And we would feel so stupid about calling, the law. So we didn't do anything. We just ignored it, even though that smell was still there when we came out of the store. And so I told my mom, if we're still smelling this tomorrow, we need to call the police. So we went back down there the next day, and sure enough, we smelled the smell. And we went back and forth again. My mom did not want to call. We did not have a telephone in the apartment for some reason. I don't know. This was before cell phones. They might have been what people called car phones in that day, but we didn't have a car. We didn't have the money to afford such a luxury. I mean, these were cheap apartments. And I said we could use the payphone because there was a payphone right in front of the store, And again, we were like, well, what would do? What would we call? Do we call 911 or the regular number? And my mom was like, I just don't want to do this. I don't want to call because it's probably a dead animal. Because she said it wouldn't be a dead person around there, but there was a wooded lot behind these businesses next to the grocery store on the other side of that driveway. And, it was not very large area of woods, but it was big enough where something like this could have been, hidden. And we just decided not to because my mom didn't want to, and she didn't want to be involved just in case. And I was like, this is a dead body. I know that smell it's a dead body, even though I had never smelled one before, because I knew from the descriptions in true crime books that it was a dead body. I said, it's a human. And we were thinking maybe a homeless person, even though there were no homeless in the area. Maybe a homeless person crawled back there and passed away. Anyway, that very same day, we found out. I don't know if it was on the news or what, but we found out that it was actually a teenage girl, and she had actually been missing for a couple of days. Apparently she had a little spat with her mom and she left, and she went over to her friend's house who lived in the apartment across from ours. And another one lived next door, but the one next door, she didn't really hang with the girl because she was older. But the people across from us, daughter was about the same age, and she would hang out with her, and she had been over there. and she left. She said, I'm going home. And she never made it. And it turns out she got picked up by the wrong person. And I don't know why she would get in the car. I don't know if he forced her into it or what. But she wound up over there. So he obviously, did other things before he deleted her, unalived her. And it was just such a shock, because I had known that smell was not right. And I wished I had, involved the law. Not that it would have mattered, because they never found the guy. I don't think the case is solved to this day. I have to look it up. But the last time I looked it up, and this was a couple of years ago, before the pandemic, they had not found who had done it. And I felt so bad. I don't know if her mom is still alive. This was in 1995. And I don't know if her mom is still even alive, but to lose your life like that, it just bothered me, because I would think about it from, time to time. It reminded me of another murder that took place probably when I was a toddler, or maybe before I was born. I think it happened in either the very late 60s, but I don't think it was. I think it was the early 70s, when a friend of my aunt's went missing. She actually had called my aunt and asked her to go, downtown with her to hang out and, I guess, shopping, whatever. And my aunt had other plans, so she, just blew off, And so apparently she went by herself, and she wound up missing, and people were looking for her. And sometime later, I don't know if it was a week or what, but her body was found off of this trail. And in that area, there's actually a few houses, not very many, but there's one right where that trail area is. And they found her body there, and it was badly decomposed. And I remember we were driving up this road. My aunt had a Camaro back then, and I was in the back seat. I think my brother was with us, but I'm not sure if he was. All I remember was that Blondie was playing on the radio, and my aunt, gestured over to that area and said she remembered, she hated passing that area because it reminded her of her friend. And I can't remember the friend's name. I was just a child. I was probably, I don't know if I was 10 or what. I was 9 or 10, or maybe even 11. And my mother and she were talking about it. And they didn't discuss it long, but it just stuck with me, that memory. And so a lot of times, every time I go along that stretch of road, I would look over there and think about it. And years later, I had this apartment, and I would take my mountain bike. I bought this mountain bike. It was very cheap, very, very cheap, from Walmart. I put it together myself because I couldn't get anyone else to do it. I didn't know who to ask, so I put it together myself, and believe it or not. And I would ride out to down this very trail. And every time I passed through that section, I would look over there and think about, where her body had been found. And I would ride out to this lake and then come back. And it was like a total of maybe 10 or 12 miles. And at first, when I first did it, I could barely do it because I just was not in biking shape. But I never forgot about that that story my aunt told. It just was crazy. And that's not the only thing. There was another one. My other aunt, who's no longer with us, she, I don't know if she was a nursing student at this time or what, but my grandparents and this other aunt, who is also no longer with us, they lived in this, like these apartments not too far from downtown Winston-Salem. And they had a neighbor. She had just had a baby, and she would listen to like religious music sometimes, Christian music, gospel music. And one time they said a record, it got stuck, and it was pretty loud. And they were like knocking, trying to get her to come to the door to tell her to turn the music down. And I don't know who got in there or what. Maybe it was a relative or her dad but my aunt went in there with them, with the person, and it turned out she had, they heard the baby crying too, so people really wanted to get in there. They didn't know what had happened. And when they went in there, they found out she had, unalived herself. And my aunt described how she looked. And that's another memory that stuck with me. I would think about it, off and on. And it was just like, even though I had never seen it, I could just imagine it. The baby crying, the music, still, like the record stuck in. I don't know why she did it. And you think about things like that because there was a friend of my cousin's. She was only 16, and she, unalived herself. She kept having these stomach pains, she said, and the mother never paid them any attention. She had a bunch of kids, and she was just one of those parents who was just, I don't know, not present in her children's lives. And they investigated it, and I don't know what happened there. I don't know anything about them. She was an attractive young lady, and it was just so shocking to our family. And to this day, it hurts her brothers to talk about it. The mother ended up moving everybody to like Virginia, like I don't know what's in Virginia, and I guess she just wanted to get away from the area. And one of her brothers, he moved his family out to California. I don't know if that was just to get away from that area or just because he met someone. I think it was just because he met someone, but they did not want to talk about it. And I remember some weird old cousin of mine actually tried to bring it up with one of the brothers, and he just shut down. I was like, why would you even do something like that? You don't ask people about, something like that. Would he have wanted someone to ask him about how he felt when his mom was, suffering from throat cancer? He would have been mad, probably. And so I can understand why they would be ticked off at him. And then there was this young white girl that I worked with on the job. For some reason, we just clicked. And I used to listen to a lot of like underground music in those days. She thought I was listening to Jane's Addiction. I said, no, this is some gothic band from Germany or wherever. And she said, I wouldn't have thought you listened to that kind of music. I don't know. I guess she thought I listened to like R&B, which I did, or rap, which I did not really. And I don't know, we just clicked, and I remember we kept in touch. And then one day, I didn't, she was planning her 30th birthday celebration, and she wanted to have a cookout and invite everybody. And and then I found out from someone else we had worked with that she was gone. She had taken her own life, and it was just a shock because this woman found out from another former employee of that law firm, and he had found out from this supervisor who just blurted it out to him in a Walmart. Just came up there and just said, "Did you hear about Meredith? She blanked herself," like that. And he was like ticked off at the way she said it, and it was just shocking because I had just emailed her and she was talking about her birthday, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll bring a cake, I'll make a homemade cake, and then I didn't hear anything from her. And to find that out, it was just such a shock. It really was. It threw me for a loop because she was involved in her church in the youth ministry program, and she had just gotten this fantastic position with this big time law firm in our city. And wow, I was just shocked at that. Really shocked. I just couldn't believe it. I mean, she knew all these, people in the Democratic Party because she was a liberal, and at that time I was an extreme far leftist type person. I'm more of a moderate these days, but yeah, she was. Oh wow, it was just shocking. And the last thing that happened was that lake, the same lake I biked out to. Well, I had moved from that apartment, so I was living in this apartment. It was a apartment made up of two this a house, and it was made into two apartments, upstairs and downstairs. And I had moved into the upstairs above this idiot, which you'll hear about later. And he was he would abuse his dog. So yeah, he was an idiot. And I remember, I had this van, and I would take put my bike in the van and drive out to this lake and bike around it. And I was going to take my baby sister, who had a child of her own by this time, to work. I was going to take her to work afterwards, or maybe I was just going over her apartment. I can't remember, but it was foggy that morning, and it was fairly thick, and especially out there at the lake, you could barely see the lake for the mists and everything. And I was like, wow, is this safe? And I got on I decided not to even ride the bike. I think I just decided to walk. I was on a walk around it. I had my coffee and a mug, this thermos, one of those thermoses, and some snacks. And I was just gonna get it going. And I'm running into this guy. He was part of some little job search group I belonged to, and he was just a weird looking guy. He was from Boston or somewhere, and he kind of resembled David Berkowitz, but he was, black, light-skinned black dude. But he had this weird smirky smile like David Berkowitz. And so he was sitting on this bench smirking, and he sees me, and he starts talking, and I can't seem to get away from him. And I finally said I got to go, and that was it. And I went on, and I could see some people jogging, and they were just standing on this bridge, pointing at something. And I stopped, and there was a body floating in the lake, face down, and the person was wearing like a helmet, the bikers wear, but there was no bike to be seen. And I remember just standing there, shocked, and someone. It was a couple, and the man turned to his wife and said something, and she, they were trying to call 911, but your phones would barely work right there. So she just took off running to the office, and he looked at me and he said, "Dude, you think I should go in and get it?" It's like, I don't know. I don't even know what I said. I think I said I don't know. And then this other couple came up. There was a man on a bike, and his wife or girlfriend was running, and she started gagging. And this guy went out there and pulled the body up. And oh my goodness, I can tell when I saw the guy's face. He was an older guy. I later found out he was 60. But you could tell he was an older guy. It was like a dribble of blood coming from his mouth, and his eyes were fixed. There was just no life in him. But the ambulance people got there, the fire trucks, and they were doing their best. It was like a bunch of paramedics, and they took his, moved his clothing so they could get to his chest, and they were putting, I guess, heating packs or something on him. They were trying to restart his heart, resuscitate him. And I had never seen anything like that before. I mean, I was just shocked. I had to give a statement to the police. And they asked me, was I okay? I said, yeah, I'm just going to walk it off. I'm just going to go walk. And I went and walked, when they let us go. And I just went and sat down at this little rocky area and just stared at the lake. And by that time, the mist and the fog or whatever was dissipating. And I just sat there. I could barely, I couldn't even eat the snacks I brought. I tried to drink some coffee. To my credit, I didn't retch or gag or anything. I was just sitting there and trying to process it. I finally just walked around the lake, and I ended up going home. I didn't go home. I went to my sister's. And I told my mom and my sister, and they were like, "What?" Yeah, I said, I just saw a drowned body being pulled out of the lake. And I mentioned it on Facebook to some people, and they were like, "What? What do you mean?" And someone said, "Is it this?" And it was some silver alert. And I was like, I don't know, but it could have been because it was in the area. And found out, I don't know if it was that day or the next day, but I found out he was 60 years old. He was just out there riding his bike, and I don't know if they ever found the bike. It just sank to the bottom of the lake. And it was just terrible. I think he was the fog, you know, he was like confused, and he ended up driving off that bridge. It wasn't much of a bridge, really. It was just like a trail, basically. And there was no, I mean, there was a bridge, but part of it was like a trail, and he probably just went off of it, thinking he was, you know. And they, years later, they drained the lake and did some kind of work over there, and someone died doing that. But I didn't, I wasn't around when that happened. And there have been other drownings there, like these two Hispanic brothers or friends. They drowned in it out there drinking in a canoe. Then somebody else stole someone's sailboat, and he drowned. Apparently, he was under, the influence, but I didn't see them. So it was just this older man, and it was just such a. And every time I went out there to that area, I couldn't help but think of it. It's like these things are on my mind. And not all the time, not anymore, but if I was to, go back to my home state and go out to that lake and walk around there, I would think about, what happened that day. And it was close to Thanksgiving. Back in, I think it was 2000, I want to say 2007 or 8, one of those years. It was a while ago. Wow, just I hope I never see anything like that again, ever. Never. And I hope whoever's listening, I hope you don't have to go through anything like that. It's crazy.